Okay, so Be'ezras Hashem, there are really four stages that take place within the writings of the Arizal in terms of how creation and existence comes into being. And what the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh, through his Heilige Talmud, the Maggid of Mizrich, and the other Talmidim HaKadoshim, especially through the Balatanya, Zchus Yogan Aleinu, and the Admorei Chabad throughout the generations, Rabbi Nachman, all of the tzaddikim. So we see how these four stages are not only relegated to the way that HaKadosh Baruch Hu brought existence into being, meaning to say the ontology of things, but they can also be applied and experienced in a fundamentally real way within the individual themselves. Mi besari echazeh, from my own flesh I shall behold the Ribbon Shleila, meaning to say from my own psychology, from my own emotional experiences, through my own processes that I go through on a day-to-day basis, I'll be able to uncover the methods and the processes through which HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world, thereby allowing me to take my experiences and now see them in the context of how HaKadosh Baruch Hu reveals himself. So now my inner experience becomes a map, a coordinates that mark the same exact way that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is expressing himself, and that's how we live out the principles of Mahu Af'ata, that just as HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Boina Elamus Umachrivam, he creates worlds and destroys them, so to the individual creates worlds and destroys them, etc., etc. The value of this is obviously that while some are worthy of contemplating the secrets and the mysteries of existence, all of us are in truth capable and worthy of contemplating them. But there comes a time, like we've spoken about, where the urgency of the moment and the feelings of the heart, or the Lev Yodea Maras Nafsho, or the Azavariti Bi'oni, becomes so overwhelming that the teachings need to be applied medicinally. And we need to be able to take those teachings, those hidden secrets of the Yechidei Hadoros, of Moshe Rabbeinu, Rashbi, of the Arizal, of Baal Shem Tov, Rabbi Nachman Mefega, the tzaddikim in our generations, to apply them as a medicinal salve to elevate our own inner experience. And what we come to find is that when we elevate our own inner experience, memela, the external experience shifts, because the self is a composite of all things. We are fractalized expressions of the entirety of existence. And whatever is true in the most generalized of principles is also true in the most particularized of principles, as the Taras Chacham and the Rashash come to teach us, as the Rebbe makes so fundamentally clear. So yes, the world is a big person, but the person is also a small world. And whatever happens within us is taking place within the world, and whatever is happening within the world is taking place within us. As Rabbi Nassan writes, as he heard so often from his Rebbe, the Nachal Navei Makar Chachma, Rabbi Nachman ben Fegas, Zchus Yogan Aleinu, that when there are milchamos ba'olam, when there are great wars in the world, that is true in the highest spheres, and it's also true in the lowest, most particularized spheres. So instead of focusing on the national space, says Rabbi Nassan, of the milchama, one can come to understand that there's that very same milchama taking place in the same town that the person lives in, and not only that, but within the same block, and not only that, but within the same house, and not only that, but within the same family, and not only that, but within the same person themselves, that each and every person has the world within them. V'gam ha'olam nasan b'libam. And therefore, when a person awakens an akuda in their heart, mamela, we're awakening that part of ourselves that rests at the heart of existence. And so the transference of the teachings of the Arizal, which operated on an ontological level of the worlds, into the psychological space of the Baal Shem Tov, is not some momentary allowance for, okay, you can't understand what's going on out there, now only understand what's going on in here in some psychological way. That might be true also in certain moments, but the deepest truth is that the Giloy of the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh is the Giloy of the unity between the Klal and the Prat. It's not simply that we don't have the ability to focus on the Klal or what's happening on the outside. It's that we've come to realize that the Prat itself, ourselves, our own most subjectivity with all of our aches and pains and joys and excitements that carry us through the beginning of our lives towards Me'ava Esrim Ad Bias Koil Tzedek, that is as essentially reflective of the grandiosity of the cosmos and the entirety of existence, to the degree that when I take one step forward, I am fixing not only myself, but I'm fixing the entirety of existence. And that is the Giloy of the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh. It's a furthering of the revelation. It's a furthering of the teaching, showing how they apply within the self as well, because everything is reflective of the infinitude of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, including Nishmas Yisrael. Now, when it comes to the creation of the world in the Arizal, and we're going to move through these relatively quickly, there was the Or Ein Sof, that was Koidim Habriya. There was the all-saturating light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu that saturated all possibility of existence to the degree that there was no hypothetical possibility of there being the notion of anything that exists other than the all-saturating light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which leads to the secret of the Tzimtzum, to the secret of the contraction down to a singular point that minimizes the intensity of the Ribbono Shel Olam's infinite expression and reveals the capacity of limitation. Yes, limitation continues to exist within the all-saturating content of, or context of, infinitude, meaning Tzimtzum is Eino Kepshuto, the absolute saturation of Or Ein Sof never deviates for even the slightest second, which would be a theoretical impossibility, as Rabbi Nachman points out in Torah 64. But within the space of the infinite light emerges or is carved out the possibility of limitation, what we refer to as the potential of limitation that emerges from within the unlimited itself, which is what we call the Chalal HaPanui, the void or the apparently empty space wherein existence is going to take shape. After that initial removal of the infinite light, so to speak, so that the emergence of this potential space of being can take shape in the guise of a finite expression that is continuously rooted in its infinite source, HaKadosh Baruch Hu re-enters a kav or Ein Sof, a ray of infinite light back down into that void to re-illuminate it, to reintroduce the notion of that all-saturating light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But here we encounter a paradox of all paradoxes. It's a measured form of infinitude. Prior to the Tzimtzum, there was an unmeasured form of infinitude. There was absolute nothingness, because all that there was the true somethingness, which is the Esha Amiti of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to the degree that there could be nothing else that existed. Eino ein milvado. Then we have the Tzimtzum. Then HaKadosh Baruch Hu allows this impossible gilui of the kav, of that mafli la'asos, of that secret of a measured form of infinitude, that the infinite is still present, but in spite of the fact that it's infinite, it still maintains itself within the semblance of finitude, within the semblance of containment and measurement. So we're not losing out on the intensity or the potency of the infinite light that is descending back down into the now apparently voided playing field of the unfolding nature of existence, but it is going to be in a measured way that we can continue to engage it and find it and enjoy it without being nullified in its light, which is the secret of Bechira. Now, once that ray of light descends down into the Kav, so we experience what the Arizal describes as three stages, which we read about in last week's Parsha, with regards to Yaakov's engagement with Lavan, which are Akudim, Nekudim, and Berudim. Now, the things that I want to focus on are the secondary stages of Nekudim and Berudim. The Arizal describes two fundamental stages in the unfolding nature of the worlds that we encounter in our consciousness, in our emotional experiences, in our contemplation of self, and in the coping mechanisms and the narrative structures that we create for ourselves as Nishmas Yisrael through the lens of our holy tzaddikim, to enable us to use the Torah as the glasses that allow us to move through life, which is a difficult thing. And what these two stages are referred to as Nekudim and Berudim, or Tohu and Tikkun, chaos and order. Now, the fundamental, and again, I'm skipping many hakdamos because we'll always come back to the same hakdamos, but I want to get to the nekuda hayesodit of what we're speaking about now. But suffice it to say that in order for there to be the proper balance, the balancing act, the impossible balance between the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which negates the possibility of anything other than that infinite light, as well as the receptacle or the containment elements, the vessels that have the ability to contain that light and allow it to be received in a proper way, because it's only through the concealment of that light that one can actually engage with that light as something apparently separate from that light. If it were not for the containment, then it would be uncontained, thereby negating and nullifying everything once again. So the balancing act that HaKadosh Baruch Hu needs Kavyachol to create is Oros and Kalim, lights and vessels, infinitude and finite, light and containment, light and darkness, etc., etc. All of the binary oppositions or the synonyms that we could apply to those two elements, expression and receptivity, that will allow the expression to kind of take shape without minimizing its essential form, but at the same point allowing for the existence of something other than it. Now, in the beginning of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's expression of the systems of the worlds, we encounter 10 vessels. There are 10 vessels, the spheros. We encounter these receptacles that are now prepared in order to receive the influx of divine light, to allow for the balancing act, for creation to continue to exist in spite of the fact that the infinite is being revealed, because the infinite is now revealing itself through what appears to be a finite expression, thereby mitigating the intensity or balancing the intensity or absorbing the intensity of the infinite light so that we can continue to exist. In the beginning, these kalim, these Eser Eser Kalim, these Eser Spheros, were aligned in a linear form, one beneath the other, beneath the other, beneath the other, beneath the other, beneath the other. And in this process, what we refer to as Chad Samcha, which was only reliant upon a singular line. So this is what we refer to as the stage of Tohu, as the stage of Nikudim, the place of Shvira Sakelim, where things go wrong in a cataclysmic way, creating a trauma in the place of a building. But as we're going to see, it was a fundamentally necessary stage of trauma. It's a constitutive trauma. It's a trauma that builds deliberately rather than an accidental trauma that destroys in a consequential way. And so in the world of Tohu, what happens is each and every vessel wants to allow itself, so to speak, to be the most significant one. Each vessel wants to receive all of the lights. It's the element of Ana Emloch. Each one saw itself as operating in a state of independence. And because independence is rooted in the sense of an I or an egoism that is separate and apart from that person or that person, from they or them. And therefore, the motivating factors when it comes to a person who is maintaining their individualized existence in opposition to other forms or other people is going to be kinetaiv and kavod. It's going to be eyes of scarcity. I want to take everything because if you take anything, that means I'm losing. So I'm going to take everything. There was a fear that Arizal says of one from the other, a certain concern that the other is going to take from me. The other vessel would try and take more light in an anthropomorphized way, and therefore each vessel tried to receive all of the light. So the problem is that the receptacles, the kalim, need to be strong enough. They need to be powerful enough in order to maintain that infinite light, to create the balancing act necessary for a world where bechira is possible, where there's an equal level, somehow and possibly, of divine revelation as well as divine concealment at the very same point, with each of them upholding one another at every moment to ensure the most significant truth of all existence, which is bechira, the ability for the human being to make the choice to live in context of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And therefore, in this early immature stage of tohu, of chaos, what happens is the kalim are very delicate. The kalim are very delicate. They haven't properly developed themselves, and the lights are very intense. And when the light comes in, the vessels shatter. They cannot contain the light. There is an overwhelmingness. There is a shock experience, some element of an overwhelming trauma where the light descends down and the receptacles are not strong enough to receive the content of that experience, to receive the content of the divine expression at that point. And there's a cataclysmic shattering, the shviros hakelim, which creates the world of tohu, the world of chaos, the world of destruction, and the worlds that are built and destroyed of the kids of the kings, the Malchei Edom who passed away, etc., etc. And in this place of tohu, what it means on a psychological level is that there is a profound level of expression of light, a profound expression of an intensity of awareness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, of a hishtoikikus towards HaKadosh Baruch Hu, of a ga'aguim, of a yearning, of an undying urgency to ascend upwards, 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 in order to encounter the Rabbeinu Shalom, but it is not in line with the vessels that a person is capable of receiving. So what it gets translated into is an experience of a tremendous amount of desire, a tremendous amount of yearning, of urgency, of a chaotic energy, of a burning desire to move somewhere, to go upwards, 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 that doesn't necessarily find a counterpart that has the capacity of receiving it properly, of allowing it to settle in. And this creates a sense of hypocrisy. It creates a sense of riboy oros, of too much light. It's a chaotic desire to break free of all of the confines of the typical orientation towards the regulations of self, and to throw oneself into a flight of fancy, to throw oneself into a place of intensity just for the sake of experiencing what is most burning at that moment of desire. That is the world of tohu. That is the world of confusion. That is the world of overwhelmingness, where the senses are shocked to a degree that the light is so overwhelming that it becomes blinding. Afterwards, what HaKadosh Baruch Hu needed to do, Kavyachol, and what the entirety of our existence is all about, is taking that world of chaos and allowing it to process itself properly, to redevelop itself, to work through the traumatic symptoms or the post-traumatic symptoms, and to allow it to come to a place of regulation, to come to a place of connectivity, to come to a place, most importantly, of balance, of the mitkila, of the scales that hold equal points in kind of an equal state, where each side holds the other in in its oppositional force, that each thing ensures that its opposite gets upheld because it continues to serve as the oppositional force to the other thing. And that balancing act, that anti-magnetic kind of force between the two, allows the two to operate in an impossible unity of a paradox that continues to exist, minayube, at the very same point. This is the world of tikkun. This is the world of vessels and lights that are equally balanced. This is where the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's infinite light undergoes a certain containment, a certain level of reduction, so that it can emerge or be balanced in a way that can be received without overwhelming the vessels. Here, instead of the Seros or the Kalim being aligned one on top of the other, with each one wanting to receive it all, not being able to, and being thrown into the chaos of destruction and disorder. But over here, we enter into a place of the Gimel Kabin. We are no longer working with a Chad Samcha, a singular line. We are working with a left, a right, and a center. The right oriented towards the Chesed orientation of expansivity, of Chachma, of Chesed, of Netzach, that movement from inside towards outside. The left level is going to be Gevura, it's going to be Bina, Gvura, and Hod, that receptivity, that containment, that balancing act, that antithesis to the thesis of the right side. Then there's going to be the Kav HaEmsai, which is Keser, Das, Tiferes, and Yisoid, and Malchus, which are going to be the balancing act, the alignment between the two, and the Yichud Nifla of Oiris and Kalim that are mityashiv together enough to allow for some balance. In the world of Tikkun, it's a little bit different than the world of Tohu. In the world of Tohu, there was an intensity of light, but there was a minimized form of vessel. In the world of Tikkun, in the world of rectification, we have stronger vessels and a minimized form of light, because the overwhelming light of Tohu, the overwhelming light of chaos, that confusion of the self that wants everything and wants to run as intense as possible with every dream and every part of myself, and the urgency of the moment without thinking so much about how it's going to be implemented in a positive way afterwards, or rushing in with any flight of fancy or feeling to decide this or that. That orientation of Tohu, that overwhelming light, needs to be minimized. It needs to be reduced in order for functionality to take place. But one of the negative symptoms, Kavyachol, is that when we minimize the light becomes much more balanced. Now there is a regulation of spiritual intensity. There is, yes, I can do this because it fits in with the context of my life, and no, I can't do that because it doesn't fit within the context of my life. Yes, I can throw myself with abandonment into faith because I have faith in that moment, but in the moments that I don't have faith, I can't. It is in accordance with measured balancing acts. So in the world of chaos, in the world of Tohu, we have an intensity of expression, a desire, a burning light that wants more than this world can offer, but we don't have the vessels to contain it. In the worlds of rectification, we have very strong vessels that allow us to function within a world and retain that expression of divine light, Kavyachol, but it lacks that intensity, so to speak. It lacks that feverish rush towards running upwards towards the infinite, in spite of the fact that we know that we're going to fall back down in a second, but nevertheless pushing ourselves forward with self-abandonment and a mesiras nefesh l'mala mitam v'das, an intensity and intensity and intensity. And so, generally speaking, we accept upon ourselves that, okay, in order to ensure that order emerges from chaos, in order to ensure that there can be a balancing act in this world, so we'll lose out on the intensity of the light of Tohu, and we will allow ourselves to function in the measured lights of Tikkun. We'll operate in accordance with the measured intensity, with reasonable levels of excitement, reasonable levels of hope, reasonable expressions of spiritual desire, psychological, beneficial experience, and will operate in accordance to the smooth stillness of Olam HaTikun. But comes along the tzaddikim, especially Admori Chabad, and especially the Mittler Rebbe, and the Gra and the Leshem Shabbat V'Chalom obviously are as fundamentally entrenched within the sugya as is Sayyid Yisharim and Ishbitz and all of the tzaddikim and Rav Kook. But ultimately, they reveal that there is a paradoxical space that one might enter, where instead of losing out, either losing out on the intensity of the lights of Tohu or losing out on the rectified vessels of the light of Tikkun, and they say we can find a way to do both. And it's what's referred to as Oros de Tohu Bekalim de Tikkun, lights of chaos within the vessels of rectification, meaning to say that in spite of the fact that typically a person can't handle those intense lights of Ruchnias that force me to go Lamala Mitam Vadas and to come to the place of recognition that all that exists is Leis Asar Panimine, and that nothing matters, and that I don't have to care about anything, and all I have to do is sit and speak to the Ribono Shel Olam or be still in myself, and I'm connected to the infinite light without any deviation. In spite of the fact that that's not going to manifest in any practical way, there is a way of holding on to that light and drawing it down into practicality. taking those lights of chaos, taking that intense desire and yearning for more, but allowing that yearning for more, those oros to tohu, allowing them to find a receptacle within the vessels of tikkun. Somehow, some way, drawing down that feverish intoxication of spiritual desire to run forward with self-abandonment into the infinite, but at the very same point, allowing that impulse to find expression within the functionality of day-to-day life of the kelim de tikkun, to have gigantic, enormous expressions of desire that somehow, some way function within the framework of an organized psyche that can function in day-to-day life. This is the secret of Iris the Tohu B'Kelim Tikkun. It's the secret of wanting more, of wanting infinitely more, knowing that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is perpetually infinitely larger than whatever notion of infinitude my mind can possibly comprehend or come to the place of not comprehending. That there's always more, there's always a place to run, there's always hishtoikakos, there's always ga'aguim, there's always the crying out to the Rebbeinu Shalom for more hiskalas, for higalena, to throw oneself with abandonment into a rikud, into music, into throwing oneself in abandonment into Avodas Hashem at the expense of other elements in one's life. That desire is always going to be there. But that desire need not be frustrated because it can't be lived out. It needs to be expressed in an imaginable way within the functional framework of our day-to-day life. So that when a person develops their kelim de tikkun, when a person develops their vessels of rectification, the mitzvos and the activities that they engage in on a day-to-day basis, their day-to-day functionality, those are the kelim de tikkun. But it doesn't mean that it has to operate within the measured light of tikkun. I can draw down the intensity of desire and allow my desire to find satisfaction to a certain degree within whatever it is that I'm doing. Every mitzvah contains all of the possible spiritual desire that one can ever contemplate, as the Vilna Gaon described at the end of his life. As we say every time we put on tzitzis or any mitzvah, that all of the 613 mitzvahs that are contained within this. And the same is true for any positive feeling or any positive midah that a person works on. Everything is contained in everything. It is not a question of quantity. There is always enough activity to maintain the intense desire that comes along with tohu. But what I need to do is I also need to learn that I'm not necessarily going to satisfy every element of that tohu, of that intense desire and yearning and hishtoikakus. Sometimes the hishtoikakus is enough. The lights of tohu within the vessels of tikkun is the light of hishtoikakus without actually trying to satisfy all of the hishtoikakus, being satisfied with the little bit of activity that I'm able to engage in and allowing that little bit of activity to contain more hishtoikakus, more desire, more yearning, more spiritual intensity than it can even hold. It's the secret of the miyut hamachzik as hamaruba. The miyut is the kelim de tikkun, hamachzik as hamaruba that contains more than itself is the oiris de tohu. It's the secret of drawing intensity and a lack of caring whatsoever about anything into the secret of caring about everything, so that as I engage in day-to-day life, as I engage in the moment-to-moment social, psychological, spiritual, religious experiences in my life, I care within the oiris, within the kelim of tikkun, but at the innermost point of the experience, there's a hishtoikakus ad ein soif mamish l'ishtava begufa demalka, to connect beyond my capacity of connection that burns at the very core of it, which doesn't need to be satisfied in any other way than recognizing that I need to draw it down into oiris, into kelim de tikkun right now. This is the secret that tzaddikim say of Yaakov and Esav. Yaakov represents the world of rectification. Esav represents the world of chaos. This is the secret of Esav's head that's buried in Marasa Machpelah, because the koach of Esav, Yitzchak loved Esav. Yitzchak loved that intensity. Yitzchak loved that desire and that urgency at the heart of every spiritual act, where if I don't have this nekuda in Torah, I'm going to die. Of if I don't have this thing, I'm not going to make it. That his oirus and the resicha of the gevurus and the eish that's boyar ad shamayim. Yitzchak loved that because Yitzchak came from that place of gvurus. Yitzchak understood the secret of laughter. He understood how it's specifically from the intensity of all things that the greatest peace and calmness is going to emerge. It's specifically from within the gvurus themselves that we're going to find the secret of Mashiach Tzidkenu. Yitzchak loved that about Esav, but Esav wasn't capable of finding those vessels. But nevertheless, those lights of Esav, that or, that hishtoikakus, that willingness to find more chedushay Torah, the secret of Torah Sheba'al Peh, of transforming every element of my life into Torah. I'm not satisfied with activate that Torah. I need more chidushim, more chidushim. All chidushim come from the sitra of Yitzchak, and they come from the Gevuras themselves. That hisayrus, Yitzchak loved Esav for that reason, but Yaakov was ultimately the Bechir Shabavos because the fundamental thing is the Dir B'Tachtoinim, the ability to apply in a practical way mitzvos and ma'asim tovim, good deeds, taking the next right step, having the next right thought, thinking in the right way for one more moment, addressing another cognitive distortion. Ultimately, we live in a world, and the need is to operate in a world with kelim de tikkun. But Yaakov Avinu understood the secret of taking the brachos of Esav, bowing down kavyachol, not to Esav, but to the secret of the Shechina that's mislabe shama, as the Arizal points out in Purim about the nitzutz kadosh that's mislabesh and Haman harasha in a certain element, with the secret of being mamtik, all of the gevuros. Yaakov draws down that koach of chaos, that koach of not caring, of not knowing, of acting like a crazy person, of mila de shtusa, of kamf meshuga mit meshuga, of a willingness to enter into a shtus de kedusha, of a pretending, of a knowing that I don't know, but nevertheless pretending that I continue to know, a knowing that I can't, but pretending to continue to hope that I can. That chaos de kedusha, that unwillingness to give in to any of the lower levels of truth that so often occupy our minds and prevent us from running forward with abandonment to the light of the infinite, we are able to draw that down into functionality. And so now the hishtoikakus, the ga'aguim, doesn't look like chaos anymore. It might not even be perceptible to the outside eye. But ultimately, in the heart of the individual, that makom of the Eish, the Bina, which is the secret of Tohu, which exists within the Tikkun, which is Chachma, that continues to be Boyer ad Shemayim, as Rabbi Nachman says, that the Eish of the Lev is Boyer ad Shemayim, and if HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not mitzamseim at each moment, the person wouldn't be able to function, because the Hishtoikikus and the Ga'aguim that a Yid has in any moment of conscious awareness of what I am and where I am and how I am in this particular moment, right here, right now, it's enough to bring Mashiach Tzidkenu. It's enough to shake the foundations from Sheshes and Mebereshis when he is able to be makir, the Eish HaTahor that's oile, from the intensity of the burning gevuros and desire at the core of the Yechida Shabanefesh, of the secret of Ketz Chai. But at the very same moment, we function as normal human beings within the world. We function, we walk, we get up, we have regulation. That's the secret, to balance the intensity within the secret of vessels. That is the ultimate goal, to draw down the lights of Tohu into the vessels of Tikkun, to have excitement within management, to have a dysfunctional level of desire within functionality. And this balancing act, this secret paradoxical space, only emerges through the secret of Yaakov Avinu, which is all of us, Bechir Sheba Avos, that we fight with Esav in order to take the blessings. But ultimately the goal is to draw the chaos and the intensity of desiring everything into the vessels of the knowledge that I can't have everything, all I have is this right now, and to allow the two to dance together, to reveal the Maila HaYasera that Rav Kook referred to as the Neshamos of Olam de Tohu, those who want more than this world has to offer, those who want so much that they're dissatisfied with what's being offered them, but at the same point to live with the secret of the Kelim de Tikkun, which is to live with satisfaction, to live with Sipuk, to live with the notion of here I am right now, and in spite of the fact that I'm Boyer Ad Ein Sof, I'm going to do the next right thing, Be'ezras Hashem. The secret of revelation and concealment in one, which is ultimately the secret of the Gilui al Baal Shem Tov, of Yud Tes Kislev. It's the encounter with Yaakov and Esav at the heart of the night, and the secret of uncovering the light of Yisrael that emerges specifically out of the battle, specifically out of the war. If it were not for the war, if it were not for the battle between the Sarah Shel Esav and all of the concealment of this world, then we would never be Zoicha to be Yisrael. It's specifically from that place that we emerge with the doubled power of not only having the lights and the vessels of Tikkun, but also having the lights of chaos expressing themselves to our benefit, Be'ezras Hashem.